Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Inside Hockey TV, coming to you from Studio 73 in downtown Boston, alongside Kevin Greenstein and Tim Rosenthal. I'm your host, McKenzie Lavoie. Well, first up, the Olympics took part this past few weeks. Zach Parise was a big hero for the United States, tying it up with 20 seconds left. Sidney Crosby had the game winner in overtime for Team Canada. What are your thoughts on that final game?
Well, it was a great tournament to begin with. Throughout the tournament, we saw some exciting games from the preliminary round, and not to mention the middle round was very good for that matter. And I thought Canada deserved the gold, even though they're the sixth seed. They had to win 4 games in 6 days, but the adversity, I think, helped them in the long run. And, of course, Sidney Crosby was the hero, so Canada deserved that goal, and the U.S. had a great effort, so they shouldn't be disappointed by any means.
Well, you know, I look at Team Canada, and they had tremendous depth. I mean, a lot of comments were sort of to the extent that if Team Canada had iced a second team for the Olympics, it would have been a favorite for medal. So you got to look at that and realize that they had tremendous depth, which helped them when they had to play the 4 and 6, the 3 and 4. When they have to play that many games in a row, what really helps a lot is when you've got the depth, that your fourth line is good enough to be the top line on many of the other squads participating. And I think that, you know, you look at Sidney Crosby, and he's taken a big lead over Alexander Ovechkin in the court of public opinion.
Well, if you look at what Herb Brooks said in 1980, he said that a team is a team. It's not a lot of big names, and that was a big deal on the Canadian hockey team, was that they had so many huge names. They had a complete line from San Jose of all All-Stars. So a lot of people thought maybe they wouldn't have the right chemistry, but they really did click, they really did succeed, and they played a great hockey game. They came back to win it for the country in Vancouver. They've never won a gold medal in hockey in Canada before. So obviously a big deal. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is the collective bargaining agreement. Now, the NHL doesn't want players to participate in the Olympics, and the players do. So, Kevin, what are your thoughts on the guys coming in and playing in the Olympics in 2014?
Well, you know, I have mixed feelings about it. You know, there's the quality of hockey. At the beginning of the tournament, I didn't think the quality was all that high. Certainly from Canada, I think everyone would agree. But after Canada hit their stride, the whole tournament sort of changed at that point. And it became a very, very well-played hockey tournament, and it culminated with one of the greatest games I've ever had the privilege of watching. So from a hockey perspective, it's hard to argue against NHL participation given what we saw on Sunday. The problem is, the NHL had $300 million worth of players taking the ice, starting with the semifinals, rolling through the gold medal game. Just those 4 teams remaining, $300 million worth of payroll. That's a lot of risk. The players aren't getting paid, and the owners could potentially see huge costs to them if those players are hurt and unable to participate in the stretch run in the playoffs. So you can understand the owner's perspective as well. I hope that they do get it together to participate, but if they don't, I'd like to see the World Junior Championships be moved to become the Olympic tournament every 4 years. I think that that would be the next best thing.
And just to expand on that, I mean, I think the NHL should take advantage of this opportunity. I wrote about it in my column last night, and after seeing the tournament, they should definitely take advantage. They're going to have a guy like Ovechkin, even though the court of public opinion might disagree with his Crosby versus Ovechkin. He's going to be marketable. He's already a spokesperson for Sochi. I think it would be a huge mistake for the NHL to not participate and risk a guy like losing Ovechkin, you know. So, but I can also see the World Juniors. I'm kind of fence-sitting on this issue right now, so I can see the World Juniors participating, like Kevin said, and you know, what happens, it remains to be seen. It's still a long way from that, for sure.
We look at, I mean, the former World Junior teams when Crosby was on that team. So you look at it from one perspective, and it would sort of be an easier way to see those great players before you actually would see them had they been in the NHL. So that's one way to look at it. But then at the same time, when they redid the CBA, they did it to redesign interest in hockey, to make the game more exciting. And you can't get any more marketing than the Olympics, especially when you have teams like the U.S. and Canada going up again. It's a game that, it's not just a Canadian sport anymore. The U.S. is a major player now. So you look at that, and that's great as well.
And you look at some of the other European nations. Sweden has won 2.
Finland, yeah.
Finland's back in there. The Czech won a gold in '98 when the NHL first participated. So it's a very even playing field now, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, Tim made a great point regarding Ovechkin. I think that he is a big part of what the decision will ultimately be regarding NHL participation. I mean, you look at Alexander Ovechkin, regardless of where you sit, whether it's him or Crosby, he's top player in the game. And he has said that regardless of whether the NHL participates in the 2014 Olympics, he is going to participate. And the owner of the Capitals, Ted Leonsis, supports that decision. So that being the case, the NHL really has to think hard about what the political ramifications and PR ramifications are for having one of their top players leave the NHL season to go participate in the Olympics and not allowing the other NHL players to do the same.
Right, and being out of that player for an entire year can really hurt the revenue, especially for the Capitals.
Absolutely.
When you look at
for
the market.
Caps especially. I mean, you have Crosby and Malkin still, but you still need some superstar to replace Ovechkin. That'll be hard to come by for sure.
Well, yeah, especially in the NHL when you have a lot of stars and you have a lot of big names, but the media has really locked in on Crosby and Ovechkin. So if they redid the NHL schedule, I think, so Crosby would play in every market, in a year. So it's kind of like they have to make a big decision if they want to see their big players leave.
Yeah, Ovechkin wouldn't miss a whole season, but he would certainly be taking 3 weeks off to participate in the Olympics, and that would be a huge cost for the Caps during that time.
Oh, and for sure. And even though you're going to see a lot of future guys like Taylor Hall, like Tavares, like Stamkos, who's having a pretty good year now, they might become superstars, but again, it's a long way off from that, and we don't know at this point.
All right, well, next up, we are going to discuss, obviously, the trade deadline is closing in on it. The freeze is off now that the Olympics are over. Who are the biggest buyers and sellers for the upcoming season?
For the trade deadline, I got to consider the Bruins as a buyer at this point. I mean, obviously they lost out on Kovalchuk because the price would have been too high, that Toronto's draft pick would have been involved, which they should still keep even though Toronto just got Phaneuf, just got Jaguar, because they can always trade it at the draft if they need to, if they don't like their position. But I think you're going to see some scoring come in from the Bruins, whether it's a guy like Ray Whitney or Raffi Torres, I don't know. A lot remains to be seen, but Bruins are a buyer, and I actually think a team like Buffalo, who needs goal scoring, would be a buyer too.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Eastern and Western conferences right now, and there's a lot of closely packed teams. I believe 5 points separates 8th from 13th in the West, and 5 points separates 6 from 11 in the East. So you've got a lot of teams bunched together really tightly, and that makes for an interesting decision-making process for the GMs that have to decide, well, hey, are we going to cut bait and decide to just look towards next year and accumulate some prospects and draft picks? Or are we going to try and compete here? And when there's that many teams that closely packed together, it's very difficult to make those decisions. And I think that you're going to see some teams surprise either by saying, you know what, we don't have it this year, we're going to cut bait and we're going to get rid of some talented players that people don't expect us to trade. While at the same time, you're going to see some teams that you're going to say, well, they don't really have much of a chance, but they may even act as buyers and try and get themselves into the playoff hunt with one guy or two guys that can really help them.
To expand on Kevin's argument, I think you're looking at Calgary right now, trading Phaneuf, trading Jokinen. They're kind of like sellers right now. But they're getting some talented guys in return, but probably not enough for this year. And then in regards to Toronto, I'm still fencing on whether they're buyers or sellers at this point.
Well, because they've traded their pick, I think you can say that Toronto's a buyer just because they're going to do anything they can to be better because they don't have there's no motivation for them to be worse.
But you look at Toronto with Caberlet, he's on the trade market. He might waive its no trade clause. Ponkarowski is an unrestricted free agent too.
Sure.
He might waive the no trade clause.
Yep, no question about it. So it'll be interesting to see what Toronto does.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what every team in the NHL does coming up over the next few weeks. We will keep you posted about that. And I want to thank everyone for joining us here on this edition of Inside Hockey TV alongside Kevin Greenstein and Tim Rosenthal. I'm McKenzie Lavoie. We will see you back here in 2 weeks.